So one disadvantage a serialized series like Dreamscape and Vexus have over an episodic series like DSBT, InsaniT, and animated Duels is you have to remember everything that happened in every episode you watch and watch them in the exact order. Since my non-animated Duels animations usually only get about one episode every year and a half or something, it's tough to keep all of the plot points in mind due to the slow release cycle. So this vid is to either refresh your memory, or you just don't feel like watching 2 hours of animations with outdated art styles because you're not that invested in the story yet. Either way, full immersion in 3, 2, 1. One day, Dylan, that's me, and my 4 closest friends, Keela, Andrin, Ajin, and Vampire Lord, as well as 2 of our other friends, Ezane and Jasmine, went to an arena called the Savage Coliseum to watch an incredible fight between Soya and Vladimir. They are super famous and are like the most badass and powerful dudes around. Unfortunately, before things even start to get good, there's this huge flash of light and we find ourselves in this white void of a dimension with floating rubble everywhere. On top of that, we're all separated. This ghost with a huge scythe, known as the Possessor Ghost, suddenly shows up, and he is responsible for sending us to this dimension. If that wasn't bad enough, a zombie sorcerer named Ethan shows up. He's a total smug bastard who is a bit off his rocker, and he has the power to manipulate terrain however he wants. However, he does reveal a bit of info to me. Turns out this dimension, as well as the Possessor Ghost, was created by a witch from the parallel universe named Melinda. The Possessor Ghost was a creation of hers she unleashed upon my universe as one final F you against us before she was sealed away in the parallel universe's version of the Possessor Ghost's dimension. Ethan knows all this because he is from that parallel universe, and his sister, Kyrian, is his counterpart from my universe. Then this super cool, super powerful, super smart, and super pompous sorceress named Melissa shows up and saves my ass. Turns out she used to be an evil apprentice of Melinda's, and she mastered the cycle of death and rebirth, so she is basically immortal. Luckily, she had a change of heart a while back. Meanwhile, the Possessor Ghost tries to tango with Keela. Big mistake. With her soul-severing scythe, she destroys the Possessor Ghost and brings us all back home. After all that went down, we decided to have a little fighting tournament of our own. And surprisingly, Melissa joins in. After a few fights, someone from Keela's past shows up and interrupts her match. Kyla. She has some sort of beef with Keela, and there's a reason the two of them are so similar, which she'll reveal if Keela beats her in a fight. Kyla then turns gross and has Keela pinned, but Keela taps into some dark power and turns grosser. She is about to destroy Kyla, but Ajin and Vampire Lord snap her out of it. As promised, Kyla reveals to Keela that she is a demon from the Unworld, just like Keela is. The Unworld is a dimension of despair and hopelessness, and it's how Keela and I met. I was once dragged into the Unworld by the Shadow Hands, which are sent out to kidnap people by the ruler of the Unworld, the Master of the Damned. Keela had completely given up hope on ever escaping the Unworld, but I managed to convince her to give it another shot. However, the Master intercepts us, and Keela reveals it was all a trick to break my spirit and that she was helping the Master this whole time. And boy, my spirit did she break, because I'm completely okay with her destroying me with the Master's scythe. Then, it turns out to be a double cross, and she smashes the scythe, which destroys the Master and the Unworld. Turns out this was all part of a 2-year plan of Keela's to get buddy-buddy with the Master so she could get a hold of his scythe and destroy it. Then Kyla tells her side of the story. She was the Master's second in command, but once Keela entered the picture, he became interested in her due to her determination. When Keela's spirit finally broke after a year, the Master offered to turn her into a demon, which she accepted. Eventually, Keela took Kyla's spot as the second in command, which made Kyla jelly. She tried to kill Keela and was banished to the depths of the Unworld by the Master as a result. After Keela destroyed the Unworld, Kyla asked around about what happened and found out about Keela's plan. Long story short, Kyla is out for revenge. After Kyla flees the scene, we return to our fighting tournament, and the final battle is Vampire Lord against Keela. Vampire Lord ends up going overboard, tapping into his primal vampiric instincts from when he was evil, and severely injures Keela. With Melissa suddenly MIA, she has to be taken to the hospital. Almost as soon as she is hauled off, a giant cyborg chameleon named Chen bursts out of the ground. Chen is the guardian of the planet and only surfaces when it is in grave danger, and joining him is a man named Kai. Without any explanation, they recruit me to help them. They take me to this place called the Well of Power, where I meet Ellinan. They tell me there's this being named the Overlord of Evil sealed away in the underworld, with a "dur" after it, and that seal is starting to weaken. Kai and Ellinan believe Melinda is somehow behind all this, but I remember her being killed. Drake and Kedron, the ones responsible for sealing away the Overlord, show up, and the three of us have to travel to the underworld to figure this out. Chen escorts me to the drop-off point, and I think about my encounter with the Overlord. The Overlord started off as a rumor, but he quickly made his presence known with his ability to cast maddening illusions and possess people. He has a floating base set up by a massive tree called the World Tree, which keeps the planet from falling apart. He plans on destroying it with a laser, which will open up a dimensional vortex, and once inside that vortex, the Overlord will be able to control all of existence. Believe it or not, the Overlord originated from a serene world in the clouds called the Sky Dimension. One day, Ethan and Kyrian showed up and tried to mess things up, but they were driven away by the Sky Dimension's guards. Unfortunately, their meddling created a dark vortex, and with no way to destroy the vortex, the guards had no choice but to seal the entire Sky Dimension away. Of course, Ethan and Kyrian couldn't leave well enough alone, and they broke that seal and unleashed the Overlord upon the world. Luckily, by all of us working together, we managed to seal him away in the underworld before he could execute his plan. After story time, we finally reach the underworld, and the three of us go inside the Overlord's seal. Kedron and Drake decide to use their powers to wipe him out for good, but the Overlord's immortality makes things futile. On top of that, while they were so busy trying to defeat him, he managed to brainwash Melissa enough to try and break his seal. I remind Melissa of the day when me, this girl named Alice, and this talking woodpecker named Will convinced her to have a change of heart. This is enough to break her from the Overlord's brainwashing, and we decide to have one more chat with him. He reveals to us that Melinda is his parallel universe counterpart because both of them are sealed away, can create minions on a whim, can cause planetary pandemonium, and their initial releases were linked to their family. Yeah, Kyrian and Ethan are somehow the kids to the skeleton dude. Oh, and the Overlord of Evil and Melinda are both freaking immortal too. Like the Overlord, Melinda's seal is weakening too, and unlike the Overlord, Melinda has complete freedom in the dimension she was sealed away in, so she'll have an easier time breaking free than he does. She was able to use her power to weaken the Overlord's seal, so he could brainwash Melissa into breaking his seal, so he could break Melinda's seal. A bit convoluted, but hey, whatever almost works. We decide Melinda is our new target, and Kedron and Drake put another seal over the Overlord's current seal in the meantime. I decide to tell the group about my past encounters with the Possessor Ghost and Melinda. In the middle of a match in the Savage Coliseum, the ghost shows up, took over one of the fighters' bodies, and sucked out everyone's souls. We found out about this through Ezane's phone, but before we can do anything, we were teleported to the ghost dimension and separated. However, we were able to free ourselves by defeating it. Sound familiar? As for Melinda, I hear a story about her while visiting the parallel universe. She was sealed away in a black tower in another dimension, but that seal will break if she ever finds out about her sister, Betty. Betty isn't exactly sweet, but that tends to happen when a universe has a law where people can't be within 10 feet of her due to the risk of her finding out about Melinda. One night, a minion of Melinda's crushes the bottom half of Betty's body with a pillar. A doctor is there to perform an operation on her, but I notice his cell phone says Melinda on it, and he turns out to be another minion of hers. I correctly guessed that he was planning on releasing Melinda and killing Betty. which turns out to be a huge ball drop because this leads Betty to finding out Melinda is her sister. Turns out Betty would only believe the words of someone not from her universe, since she hates everyone who lives there. The area turns into a white void where Melinda reveals to me that she has already placed curses upon the world, but then the area morphs again into all these floating buildings. Turns out Betty, who is now a cyborg, recruited every single being in her universe in a fight against Melinda, and we were able to seal her away again. Due to Betty's connection with Melinda, we decided it's a good idea to recruit her too. After Kai and Chen recruit Betty, we make our way to the Possessor Ghost's dimension. Melissa then tells us the story of how she became Melinda's apprentice. Ever since she was a little girl, she loved reading and knowledge, which is how she discovered spellbooks and magic. This then led her discovering the dark side of magic, but info on it was scarce. One day, the Possessor Ghost appeared before her and took her to its dimension, which is where Melinda's castle was at the time. Melinda manipulated Melissa into idolizing her by telling Melissa she was a spellcaster thirsty for knowledge too, and with her knowledge of the dark arts, she could teach Melissa everything she wanted to know. You'd think Melissa would know better than to, live with strangers, but she never had any friends, so it was easy for Melinda to win her over. Eventually, it seemed like Melissa learned everything she could from Melinda, so she left the dimension and carried out Melinda's desire of using her dark magic to create chaos. Even more eventually, she met me, Will, and Alice, and, well, you know the rest. Meanwhile, Vampire Lord is at his castle in the underworld and discovers a book written by Melinda about the various dimensions that exist. Since this is one of Melinda's books, and Melinda was sealed away, Vampire Lord suspects that his castle is actually Melinda's castle that somehow ended up in the underworld. He shoves aside the bookcase and discovers a secret room with a weird portal, and goes to tell Android and Ajin about it, along with a little backstory about himself. A long time ago, some dark force was lurking at the top of the tallest tower of the Vampire Empire. The Empire paid no mind to it, which turned out to be a big mistake because the dark force spread throughout the Empire and brought curses upon everyone there. The single exception was Vampire Lord, who, at the time, was a Vampire Knight, and his armor protected him from curses. Vamps was the only Vampire Knight left, because vampires deem knights as redundant since their species have abilities like super strength and regeneration. However, Vamps continued to be a knight since he had no powers, and those things didn't exactly make him popular. Anyway, Vamps confronted the Dark Force, and not only was his armor good against curses, but his sword was too. It was as if he was destined to defeat this entity, and upon doing so, cured everyone of their curses. As a reward for saving everyone, he was given powers, a castle, and the title of Vampire Lord. This deed made him feel good too, which begun to pave the way for his eventual redemption. Back in the Possessor Ghost dimension, in order to prep us with our fight against Melinda, Melissa taps into her dark powers to summon monsters and dragons for us to fight. Afterwards, we get, critiqued on our fighting styles. This ends up ticking off Keidron, who goes off on a rant about how she is the protector of humanity, which is a thankless job due to her grotesque appearance scaring the ones she is meant to protect. Oh, and also, I can't fight very well, so I summoned my pet dragon Liz to do the heavy lifting. After all that is said and done, Drake opens up a portal to Melinda's dimension and we all go in to fight her. Little did we know, Ethan was watching us this whole time and has something up his sleeve.